Don't block me way. The shout split the hot summer air like a crack of lightning. Before anyone could react, a small, pale boy tumbled backward into the pool. The splash was enormous, too loud, too wrong, and the laughter of the rich children who had surrounded him stopped dead in their throats. The water rippled, then stilled. The boy didn't surface. For one awful moment, no one moved. The mothers under wide umbrellas clutched their glasses, blinking in disbelief. The fathers exchanged uncertain looks, muttering something about calling security. A waiter froze mid-step, unsure if it was his place to intervene. Then a little girl screamed, "Somebody help him. He's just a little boy." She was 7, small for her age, her braids glistening in the sunlight. Anna Johnson, daughter of a housekeeper who worked the morning shift. She had been playing quietly near the service gate, but now her bare feet slapped the hot stone as she ran toward the water. No one else moved. The pool manager, Rebecca Hillman, looked up from her clipboard, frowning as if the scene were an inconvenience. "Anna, stop, stay back," she shouted. Then, to the staff, "Where's the lifeguard?" "He clocked out 30 minutes ago," said a nervous waiter. "Well, get someone else." But nobody did. The older kids backed away, whispering that they hadn't meant it. Their leader, Tommy Hillman, muttered, "He just slipped. It's not our fault." The boy's hand broke the surface once thin, pale, desperate, then disappeared. Anna kicked off her shoes. "Anna, no." Her mother's voice came from somewhere behind the service door. But the little girl didn't hesitate. She dove, her body cutting through the glittering water like a flash of copper and light. The cold hit her like a punch. She opened her eyes, saw only a swirl of bubbles and blue, then caught a glimpse of him sinking small, motionless, his white shirt blooming around him like a ghost. She kicked hard, wrapped her arms around his narrow chest, and pushed upward with all her strength. They broke the surface, both coughing and gasping. "Help!" she shouted, but still no one jumped in. "Come on, move!" her mother screamed from the edge, rushing forward now. Together they pulled the boy up onto the stone. He coughed, water spilling from his mouth, tiny shoulders shaking. Rebecca arrived just as Anna climbed out, dripping and trembling. "What's going on here?" she snapped. "This area is for members only." Linda Johnson, Anna's mother, turned on her, furious. "My daughter just saved that boy's life." Rebecca looked around, suddenly aware of the watching guests, and adjusted her tone. "Let's not exaggerate. I'm sure he's fine now." The boy wasn't fine. He was pale, shivering. His lips blue. He clutched his toy boat to his chest as if it were the only solid thing in the world. Anna knelt beside him. "You're okay," she said softly, brushing hair out of his eyes. "You're safe now." The boy blinked once, his gray eyes distant and strange. "Boat," he whispered. She placed it in his trembling hand. At that exact moment, heavy footsteps pounded down the marble steps from the terrace above. The crowd turned. A tall man in a tailored gray suit was running toward the pool, his face drained of color. "Ethan," he shouted, "where's my son?" It was Daniel Sterling, 45 years old, founder of Sterling Technologies, one of the most powerful men in California. He had been in a meeting on the upper floor when he heard the scream. Now his polished shoes splashed through puddles as he dropped to his knees beside the boy. "Ethan, talk to me," he said, his voice breaking between command and prayer. He touched the child's face, then looked up sharply at the people standing nearby. "What happened?" Silence. No one answered. Rebecca stammered. "There was an accident. The boy, he fell in, but he's fine now. Everything's under control." Daniel's eyes, cold and bright as steel, cut through her words. "Under control?" He turned to see Anna soaked, barefoot, her small hands still trembling. "Who pulled him out?" Linda stepped forward, protective. "My daughter did, sir. She saw what happened." Daniel's gaze shifted back to the little girl. "You jumped in?" Anna nodded, suddenly shy. He was drowning. For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. He looked at his son, frail, shivering, and then at the girl who had risked herself without hesitation. His throat tightened. You saved his life, he said quietly. Rebecca interjected. Mr. Sterling, I was about to call for help. He didn't even look at her. You didn't move, he said flatly. Then, softer to Anna. What's your name? Anna Johnson. Well, Anna Johnson, Daniel said, his voice low but steady. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Linda placed her hands on her daughter's shoulders, tears mixing with the pool water on Anna's cheeks. She just did what anyone would, sir. Daniel looked around at the faces turned away, at the adults pretending to check their phones, at the children who wouldn't meet his eyes. No, he said, his voice rising just enough to carry. She did what no one else would. If this story moved you, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. A hush fell over the patio. Somewhere behind them, music still played soft jazz, absurdly cheerful. The scent of expensive perfume hung heavy in the air. Daniel lifted his son into his arms. Ethan's fingers still clutched the blue toy boat. The billionaire's suit soaked through instantly, but he didn't care. He glanced once more at Anna, and their eyes met a silent promise, a connection forged in the shock of fear and the purity of courage. Thank you, he said simply. Anna nodded, unsure what to do with a billionaire's gratitude. As Daniel carried his son toward the medical office, the crowd parted. Some whispered, others stared. A few tried to smile, as though nothing serious had happened. Linda pulled Anna close, wrapping her in a towel that smelled faintly of lemon and soap. You're safe now, baby. Anna looked at the water, now calm again, the sunlight sparkling across its surface. Mama, she whispered. Why didn't anyone else jump? Linda followed her gaze, her expression weary. Sometimes, sweetheart, people forget what it means to be human. Behind them, Daniel paused at the door, glancing back once more. The little girl stood by the water's edge, small and soaked, the only spark of decency in a sea of indifference. He turned away, tightening his hold on Ethan. The boy murmured something too soft to catch, but Daniel thought he heard one word. Friend. And as the party's laughter slowly resumed, Daniel Sterling knew the afternoon had changed something fundamental. Wealth, power, reputation, none of it had saved his son. A child from the shadows had. The air around the pool had turned heavy, as if the sun itself had dimmed. The laughter that once filled the terrace was gone, replaced by the uneasy silence of people trying to pretend nothing had happened. Guests began to drift away. Murmuring excuses, someone had to check on a reservation, another needed to call her driver. No one wanted to stay near the truth. Inside the first aid room, Daniel Sterling sat on a leather bench beside his son's small frame. Ethan lay wrapped in a blanket, his blonde hair damp, his lashes trembling. A medic knelt beside the boy, checking his pulse and murmuring reassuring words. He'll be all right, Mr. Sterling, the man said. Just a bit of shock. He swallowed some water, but his breathing's fine now. Daniel nodded, though his mind was far from calm. He'd seen fear before on the faces of men when deals collapsed, in boardrooms when billions were at stake, but this was different. The image of his son sinking beneath that glittering water wouldn't leave him. Neither would the sight of that tiny girl diving after him while grown adults stood frozen. Ethan shifted slightly, eyes opening to slits. Boat, he whispered again. Daniel smiled faintly and placed the toy in his son's hand. It's here, buddy. You're safe. The boy blinked once, then turned his face toward the wall. He always turned away when too many voices pressed close. Daniel brushed a hand through his own hair, feeling the ache of helplessness spread through his chest. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, smoothing her skirt. Mr. Sterling, I just wanted to say how relieved we all are that Ethan's fine. It was such an unfortunate accident. Daniel looked up slowly. Accident? She hesitated. Yes, well, children play rough sometimes. The important thing is that everything ended safely. He studied her face, noting the professional smile, the way her hands fidgeted with her clipboard. Tell me, he said quietly. Were you standing by the pool? Yes, I was supervising the event, of course. And you saw no reason to move when a 5-year-old went under? Rebecca's mouth opened, then closed. I was going to call for help, But you didn't. His voice remained calm. Too calm. My son could have died. The only person who acted was a child half his size. Rebecca flushed. Mr. Sterling, please understand this club has protocols. I own this club, Daniel said, his tone soft but final. And the only protocol I care about right now is decency. Rebecca took a shaky breath, then turned and left. The echo of her heels faded down the hall. Daniel leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of years settle on him. He'd built empires, commanded hundreds. But when his son had needed help, all his power had meant nothing. It was a child, an unknown little girl with nothing who'd acted with courage. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the pool glowed under the setting sun, still and peaceful, as if it hadn't been the scene of near tragedy. Near the far end, he saw two figures. The woman who had said her name was Linda Johnson, and the small girl wrapped in a towel. They were preparing to leave through the service gate. Daniel hesitated, then stepped outside. Miss Johnson, he called. Linda turned, startled. Oh, Mr. Sterling, sir. I didn't mean for us to be in the way. We were just heading out. You're not in the way, he said. He crouched down so he could look at Anna. I wanted to thank you again, properly. Anna stared at him, unsure. Her eyes were the color of warm earth, steady and alert. You don't have to, she said. He just needed help. Daniel felt something twist inside him. How easily she said it, no need for reward, no thought of risk. You were brave, he said. You did what grown men wouldn't. Linda placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. She just did what I taught her. You don't walk away when someone's hurting. He nodded, moved by the quiet strength in the woman's voice. I'd like to make sure neither of you are punished for that. Linda frowned. Punished? I saw how the manager spoke to you. He exhaled. That won't happen again. Linda gave a small, cautious smile. Thank you, sir. But please, she didn't do it for thanks. We just want to go home now. Where's home? He asked before he could stop himself. The staff quarters behind the maintenance lot. He looked toward the distant row of old housing units. Then let me give you a ride. That's kind, but we'll walk. It's not far. Daniel didn't insist. He only said, I'll have someone check in tomorrow, to be sure you both have what you need. Linda hesitated, then nodded. Good night, Mr. Sterling. Anna lifted her hand in a small wave. Good night, sir. Tell Ethan he's okay now. Daniel managed a smile. I will. They left, disappearing through the gate as the first evening lights flickered on around the pool. He stood there until they were gone, until the sound of their footsteps faded into the distance. Later that night, when the club had emptied and silence reclaimed the grounds, Daniel sat alone in his office. The blue toy boat rested on the desk beside a half-empty glass of water. It seemed ridiculous. A child's trinket beside contracts worth millions. But he couldn't look away from it. He thought of his late wife, Claire, how she used to laugh whenever Ethan lined up his toy boats by color, how she'd say, he lives in his own little harbor. Daniel, you just have to sail to him. She died 3 years earlier, and since then Daniel had thrown himself into work, hoping success could fill the quiet she left behind. It hadn't. Now the quiet had nearly taken his son. He leaned back, closing his eyes, hearing again the splash, the scream, the silence. And through it all, that one voice, small, defiant, cutting through indifference. Don't block me way. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Ethan sat at the kitchen table in their mansion overlooking the hills, tracing lines in his cereal with a spoon. The household staff moved quietly, aware of the tension in the air. Daniel poured coffee he didn't want and watched his son. Do you remember the girl who helped you yesterday? Ethan didn't answer. He pushed the cereal bowl aside and picked up the toy boat, turning it slowly in his hands. She was very brave, Daniel said. She saved you. Ethan looked up briefly, his lips parting. Anna, he murmured. Barely audible. Daniel blinked. Yes, Anna. It was the first time his son had spoken a name that wasn't his mother's. He felt something stir inside, a fragile thread of connection, hope mixed with guilt. He knew he couldn't let the moment pass. The world would forget what that little girl did. He wouldn't. Before leaving for the office, he called his assistant. "Get me the employment records for a Linda Johnson housekeeping staff, Lakeview Club," he said. "And arrange a meeting with her at her earliest convenience." "Is there a problem, sir?" "No," Daniel said, watching the morning light spread across the room. "There's a debt to repay." Outside, the city woke to another perfect California day, sunny, polished, unaware that one man's idea of justice had just begun to take shape. The following afternoon, Lakeview Country Club returned to its usual performance of luxury and leisure. The pool was freshly skimmed, the decks spotless, and the faint smell of chlorine covered any trace of what had happened. Yet beneath the glimmering surface, the air felt wrong hollow, as if the laughter echoing through the terrace was just a mask stretched over shame. Daniel Sterling walked along the edge of the pool, hands in his pockets, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled. He stopped at the very spot where his son had fallen in. The water looked harmless now, glistening under the California sun, but he could still hear that splash, the sound that would not leave his mind. "Mr. Sterling," Rebecca called, her voice overly bright. She hurried toward him in her heels, her clipboard clutched like a lifeline. "I've taken the liberty of organizing a safety review. The club's reputation is very important to us, and I assure you, the staff understands that incidents like yesterday's are simply unacceptable." He didn't look at her. "You've spoken to the children involved?" She hesitated. "We reached out to their parents. They're deeply sorry, of course. Boys will be boys. You know how they—" Daniel turned then, and the look in his eyes froze her mid-sentence. "My son could have drowned. I don't think that's something we can explain away as boys being boys." Rebecca swallowed. "Yes, sir, I understand." He studied her for a long moment. "Do you?" he asked quietly. "Because when I got here, you were standing over my son and the girl who saved him, and the first thing you said was that this area was for members only." Rebecca's cheeks flushed crimson. I was trying to maintain order." "Order," Daniel repeated softly. "You watched a child risk her life for another child. That's not disorder, Miss Hillman. That's humanity." She dropped her gaze, mumbling something about procedures, but he was already walking away. At the far end of the pool, a maintenance worker straightened, nervous under Daniel's sudden attention. "Sir?" "What's your name?" "Carlos, sir." "Carlos, did you see what happened yesterday?" Carlos hesitated, glancing around before nodding. "Yes, sir. I was cleaning near the gate." "Tell me." The man's voice lowered. "Those kids, they pushed the little boy. It wasn't an accident. And the manager saw it, too. She just didn't want trouble with their parents." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And what happened to the girl who saved him?" "She and her mama got yelled at," Carlos said softly. "Said they caused a scene." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Thank you." He reached into his pocket and handed the man a folded bill. "You didn't tell me this." "Understood?" Carlos nodded quickly. "Understood, sir." That evening, Daniel sat in his car outside the staff housing lot. It was a modest stretch of beige buildings behind the club's golf course, peeling paint, humming air conditioners in the windows, laundry hanging on lines. It looked so small compared to his world of glass towers and ocean view offices. He spotted Linda Johnson stepping out of one of the doors, still wearing her work apron. Beside her, Anna skipped, holding a small paper bag that looked like a dinner wrapped in foil. He stepped out of his car. "Evening, Miss Johnson," Linda startled, clutching the bag tighter. "Mr. Sterling. I didn't expect. I'm sorry to intrude." He nodded to Anna, who looked at him with curious, wary eyes. "I wanted to check on you both. And to thank you again." Linda smiled nervously. "You already did, sir." "We're fine." "She's fine. I'd still like to do more." He reached into his jacket and took out an envelope. "For your trouble. A small token. Linda's expression changed polite, then firm. "Thank you, sir, but we can't accept that. It's not charity." "Then what is it?" Daniel hesitated. "A start." Anna tugged her mother's sleeve. Mama, it's okay. Maybe he just wants to be nice. Linda sighed. She's too trusting, Mr. Sterling. You can't say no to a child who jumps into a pool for a stranger, can you? He smiled faintly. No, you can't. He knelt so his eyes were level with Anna's. Do you like school, Anna? She nodded. Sometimes. When the other kids aren't mean. Mean how? They say I talk funny, that my clothes are old. She shrugged. But I don't care much. Mama says what matters is how you treat people. Daniel looked at Linda. She's right. A silence settled, soft but full. The sun was setting behind the trees, throwing orange light across the cracked pavement. Daniel stood, tucking the envelope back into his coat. If you ever need anything repairs, supplies, call my office. No questions, no debt. Linda studied him. You don't owe us anything, Mr. Sterling. He met her gaze evenly. You saved my son. That means I owe you everything. Anna smiled shyly. Is Ethan okay? He's better today, Daniel said. He said your name this morning. Her eyes widened. He talked? Just one word, but yes. She grinned, the pure kind of smile that could crack open even the hardest day. He's brave. He just doesn't know it yet. Daniel felt his throat tighten. You sound like my wife, he murmured before he could stop himself. Linda looked surprised, but he added quietly. She used to say the same thing about Ethan. He stepped back, clearing his throat. I'll let you both get home. Thank you again for reminding me what courage looks like. As he walked back to his car, Anna called out, Mr. Sterling? He turned. Tell Ethan, she said. If he ever comes to the pool again, I'll race him. Bet he can beat me if he tries. He chuckled softly. I'll tell him that. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat by Ethan's bedside, watching the boy turn the blue boat in his fingers. She wants to race you, he said quietly. Anna. Ethan didn't answer, but a tiny curve lifted one corner of his mouth. Daniel looked toward the window, where moonlight pooled across the floor. He thought of all the people who had turned away yesterday, the wealthy, the powerful, himself included. In all the ways that mattered. Maybe the real debt he owed wasn't to the Johnsons. Maybe it was to his own conscience. He reached for his phone and opened a note file. On the top line he typed, New initiative. Kindness project divided by start internally. Lakeview first. Then he looked back at Ethan. Tomorrow, we'll go for a walk, he whispered. And maybe we'll see her again. Outside, a light breeze moved across the hills, carrying the faint scent of chlorine from the pool. Somewhere behind the club, a little girl dreamed of clear water, laughter, and a boy who finally smiled. Morning sunlight spilled through the high windows of the Sterling mansion, cutting thin beams across the marble floor. The house was so quiet that every sound seemed magnified: the tick of the grandfather clock, the low hum of the refrigerator, the distant flutter of birds outside. Daniel sat at the breakfast table with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. Across from him, Ethan sat in his booster chair, pushing a small piece of toast across his plate. The boy's blue toy boat rested beside his milk glass, still damp from his endless baths with it the night before. Big day, Daniel said softly. We're going for a walk later. Ethan didn't respond, but he looked up briefly, his gray eyes flickering with interest. Daniel took that as progress. His therapist had always said to notice the small things to see connection not in words, but in glances, gestures, tiny ripples of trust. When Daniel arrived at his office downtown later that morning, he was already late for a board meeting. But the moment he stepped into the sleek conference room and saw the faces of his executives' perfect suits, polite smiles, he realized how little it mattered. They were discussing quarterly returns, new patents, expansion plans. Words that once fueled him now felt empty. He leaned back, barely listening, until his assistant, Claire Reynolds, passed him a folder labeled Lakeview Report. She spoke quietly. You asked for documentation on the Johnsons, sir. He nodded. Inside were employee details. Linda Johnson, housekeeping, employed for 3 years. Dependent, 1 child, Anna Johnson. In neat type, it listed their wages, hours, and the fact that Linda had been reprimanded twice for bringing her daughter to work. Daniel frowned. Reprimanded by whom? Claire flipped a page. By Miss Hillman, the club manager. Of course. He closed the folder. I want her reinstated immediately with full pay for the week she's suspended. And cancel any disciplinary notes in her record. Should I notify Miss Hillman? Daniel's gaze hardened. No. I'll speak to her myself. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned to Lakeview. He told his driver to wait near the service lot. As he walked through the manicured path toward the maintenance area, the scent of cut grass filled the air. From behind a chain-link fence, he saw a familiar little figure sitting cross-legged on the ground, Anna, with a crayon and a wrinkled notebook in her lap. She was drawing. He approached quietly, careful not to startle her. That looks like a fine boat. Anna looked up, her eyes bright with recognition. Mr. Sterling. She smiled wide, a gap in her front teeth. I'm making another one. This one's for Ethan. He crouched beside her. I'm sure he'll like that. I used the color blue again, she said proudly. It's his favorite. Daniel tilted his head. How do you know that? She shrugged. He kept looking at the sky while I was drying him off. People look at what they like. He couldn't help but smile. That's very observant. She looked at him seriously. Are you mad at him? The question caught him off guard. Mad? No. Why would I be? 'Cause sometimes grown-ups get mad when kids do things they don't understand. She said. Mama says some people think different. And that's okay. But other people don't like different. Daniel studied her face the way her brow furrowed when she thought hard. Your mother's right. People can be cruel about what they don't understand. Anna's crayon paused. He's not bad, you know. He just listens to the world in a different way. He exhaled. I know. Min. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of sprinklers in the distance. Daniel realized how strange it felt, sitting on the ground beside a maintenance fence, talking to a child as if she were the only honest voice left in his life. Your mama around? He asked. She's finishing rooms upstairs. She said I could wait here if I stayed quiet. He nodded, then noticed the worn straps of her sandals, the way her socks didn't match. Anna, do you like drawing? She grinned. I love it. Someday I'll make pictures for people's walls. Not fancy people, just anyone who needs color. That's a good dream, he said softly. You got dreams? She asked. The question stunned him. He chuckled weakly. I used to. What happened? He thought of boardrooms, shareholders, deadlines, all the noise he'd confused for meaning. I guess I got busy building things that don't last. Anna tilted her head, frowning as if trying to understand. You should build things that do. He nodded. You're right. A gust of wind rustled the pages of her notebook. One page flipped over, revealing a rough drawing of a man in a suit, holding hands with two children near a lake. He recognized himself instantly, the square jaw, the tall frame. Is that me? He asked. Anna blushed. Yeah. You looked sad yesterday. So I made you smiling. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. That's very kind of you. I made Ethan smiling too, she added proudly. 'Cause he's got a friend now. Mayna. Before he could reply, Linda's voice called from the clubhouse door. Anna, time to go, sweetheart. Anna jumped up, brushing dust from her knees. Coming, Mama. She turned back to Daniel. Bye, Mr. Sterling. Tell Ethan I'll bring him this picture next time. I will, he said. Thank you, Anna. As she ran off, her laughter trailing behind, Daniel looked down at the patch of ground where she'd been sitting. The notebook page she'd been coloring fluttered in the breeze. He bent to pick it up. On the bottom, written in uneven letters, were 3 words. Everyone matters, right? He stood there for a long while, the question echoing through him. Everyone matters. That evening, back at the mansion, Ethan was building a line of blocks across the living room floor. Daniel sat on the couch, the drawing folded neatly in his hand. She made this for you, he said, setting the picture beside the blocks. Ethan looked at it, expression unreadable. Then he picked up a blue crayon from his toy box and colored a small wave at the bottom of the page. He didn't speak, but when he was done, he smiled, just a faint lift of his lips. enough to make Daniel catch his breath. "You like it," Daniel said. "I can tell." Ethan pointed at the crayon. "Anna." Daniel nodded. "Yes, Anna." He glanced at the drawing again, 3 figures by the water, smiling beneath a wide sky. Something inside him shifted, subtle but irreversible. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was both. He didn't know yet, but he understood one thing clearly now. That small girl had changed the course of his life. The next morning at Lakeview Country Club, whispers moved faster than the morning breeze. What had happened by the pool had already twisted into 3 different stories. Some said the billionaire's son had simply slipped. Others said the little black girl had caused trouble, pushing the boy and then pretending to save him. By the time the first guests arrived for their tennis lessons, the story had been cleaned of guilt, polished with lies. Rebecca Hillman, crisp and composed in her ivory suit, glided through the lobby with a smile fixed so tight it could crack glass. Her phone buzzed with messages from board members and social circles that cared more about reputation than truth. "Contain it," one text read. "The Sterlings don't like bad press." Rebecca rehearsed her version. An unfortunate accident, handled efficiently, nothing more. She had repeated it so many times she almost believed it. But when she reached the manager's office, Daniel Sterling was already there, sitting in her chair, flipping through a stack of reports she hadn't realized were missing. The sudden chill in her chest made her throat go dry. "Mr. Sterling," she stammered, "I didn't expect." "I own the building," he said evenly. "You should always expect me." She forced a smile. "Of course, sir. I was just reviewing our safety." He held up a hand. "Let's not waste time. I've spoken to witnesses. I know what happened at the pool." Rebecca froze. "Sir, I assure you, you watched." His tone was calm, but the weight of it silenced her. "You watched a child get pushed into deep water, and you did nothing. I was maintaining control of the situation." "Control?" he repeated softly. "You mean silence." The word hung in the air like smoke. He set the reports down. "The girl who saved my son, Anna Johnson, and her mother, will not face punishment for being human. You'll issue a written apology and an additional week's pay. Consider this your last warning." Rebecca swallowed hard. "Mr. Sterling." "I don't," he said, rising from the chair. "I don't want to hear excuses. I want to see decency." He left her there, staring at the papers she'd once used to protect herself. The hum of his footsteps faded down the marble corridor, leaving behind the faint echo of shame. Later that day, Daniel sat in the back of his car, phone to his ear. "Claire, set up a meeting with the board of directors. I want new guidelines for employee treatment at all Sterling-owned properties." "Understood, sir. Should I include Lakeview management?" "Not yet," he said. "I want the policy finished before they even realize what it means." He hung up and looked out the window. The club's manicured lawns blurred past, green and endless. Somewhere beyond the gates, the Johnsons' small housing lot sat hidden behind dumpsters and fences out of sight. Like most of the people who kept places like Lakeview running, at that same hour, Linda was scrubbing the marble lobby floor, her knees aching. A few guests walked by, lowering their voices as if she were invisible. Anna sat near the service entrance, reading a worn library book about sea creatures. She whispered the words to herself, tracing pictures of dolphins with her finger. Rebecca appeared, her smile brittle. "Linda Johnson?" Linda stood quickly, clutching the mop handle. "Yes, ma'am." Rebecca cleared her throat. "I wanted to, apologize for yesterday's misunderstanding. Your daughter showed great bravery, and the club appreciates your service." She pulled an envelope from her pocket. "There's an additional week's pay inside." Linda blinked. "Thank you." "Oh," Rebecca nodded stiffly. "And please remind Anna to stay out of member areas in the future. For safety, of course." "Yes, ma'am." As Rebecca walked away, Linda exhaled slowly. She turned to Anna. "Honey, let's just keep our heads down. Do our work and go home." Anna frowned. "Why did she look so scared of you, Mama?" Linda smiled faintly. "Because some people only know how to look down on others. They don't know how to look up." That evening, Daniel brought Ethan back to Lakeview. It was a quiet visit, unannounced. The staff whispered when they saw him walking hand in hand with the boy, both dressed simply in jeans and sneakers. Ethan clutched his toy boat, eyes darting nervously around the shimmering water. Daniel crouched beside him. "It's okay, son. The water's safe. You don't have to go near it if you don't want to." Ethan shook his head. "Anna," he whispered. Daniel smiled softly. "You want to see her again?" The boy nodded. A voice came from behind the hedge. "Mr. Sterling?" Anna appeared, barefoot and smiling, holding a folded drawing. "Hi, Ethan," she said shyly. Ethan's eyes lit up. He took a cautious step forward, then another. She handed him the drawing, a new one, brighter than the last. This time it showed two boats sailing side by side. "I made us friends," she said. Ethan looked at it for a long time, then traced the smaller boat with his finger. "Blue," he whispered. "Yeah," Anna said proudly. "Yours." Daniel watched them, something loosening in his chest. He had spent years trying to reach his son through doctors, programs, specialists, but here was connection, simple and wordless. "Anna," Daniel said softly, "would you and your mother join us for lunch tomorrow?" "Here at the club." Her eyes widened. "Lunch? With you?" "Yes, and Ethan, of course." She nodded so quickly her braids bounced. "I'll ask Mama." The next day, when Linda arrived at the restaurant terrace, she looked uncomfortable among the crystal glasses and linen napkins. Daniel stood to greet her, smiling warmly. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Anna and Ethan were already at the table, quietly coloring together. Linda stared for a moment, her daughter's laughter mingling with the boy's quiet hums, and her face softened. "I hope this isn't too strange," Daniel said. "I wanted Ethan to have a friend, and I thought Anna deserved better than how she's been treated here." Linda shook her head. "You don't owe us this, Mr. Sterling." "I do," he said simply. "You saved the most important thing in my life." As the waiter poured lemonade for the children, Daniel noticed how the other guests at nearby tables watched, some with curiosity, others with disdain. The sight of a billionaire dining with a black housekeeper and her child unsettled them. He caught the look of one man whispering to his wife. Daniel's jaw tightened. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You ever get tired of being invisible, Miss Johnson?" Linda looked up, startled. "Every day." He nodded. "Then maybe it's time people start seeing you." The conversation faded as laughter rose from the children's corner. Anna was showing Ethan how to fold a paper boat from the napkin. He was clumsy, but she didn't mind. "It doesn't have to be perfect," she told him. "It just has to float." Daniel watched them, something warm and fragile blooming in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt the faint hum of peace. But across the terrace, Rebecca Hillman watched too. Her smile gone, her phone already in hand. She began to type a message to the club's board, one she hoped might protect her place. Because if Daniel Sterling was serious about this friendship, the old order of Lakeview was about to break apart. The following week at Lakeview, the air buzzed with quiet unease. The members no longer laughed as freely, and staff whispered in corners when the name Sterling was mentioned. News traveled quickly among the elite. Daniel Sterling, the reclusive billionaire, had been seen having lunch with a cleaning lady and her child. To them, it was scandal disguised as charity. To Daniel, it was simply human decency. He returned to the club every afternoon that week. Sometimes with Ethan, sometimes alone. The visits unsettled Rebecca Hillman. She had built her career on keeping the wealthy comfortable, the powerful flattered, and the working class unseen. Now, the lines she had drawn for years were blurring. In the lounge, she found two board members waiting for her, Mr. Hammond, whose family had founded the club, and Mrs. Fields, who chaired its social committee. Both wore the tight smiles of people used to being obeyed. "Rebecca," Hammond began, "we're hearing troubling rumors about your management decisions, allowing staff families to linger near member areas, inappropriate interactions." Rebecca's heart thudded. "Sir, Mr. Sterling personally invited them." Mrs. Fields cut her off. "Daniel Sterling may own this place, but we represent its legacy. There's an image to maintain. We cannot turn Lakeview into a charity project." Rebecca nodded quickly. trying to keep her voice calm. Of course, I'll handle it discreetly. When they left, she sank into her chair, her hands trembling. She needed to make this right, before her name was ruined. That afternoon, Daniel arrived again with Ethan. The boy held Anna's new drawing folded in his pocket. They walked together along the path by the pool, trailed by polite stares. "Papa," Ethan whispered, clutching his father's hand. "They're looking." "I know," Daniel said softly. "Let them look." "Oh." Linda and Anna were waiting by the service gate. Anna waved the moment she saw them. "Ethan," she called, running up. The boy's face lit up. His version of joy was subtle, but Daniel recognized it instantly. Linda smiled shyly at Daniel. "You really don't have to keep visiting, sir. We don't want to cause you trouble." "It's no trouble," he replied. "Ethan sleeps better after seeing Anna. That's worth more than anyone's opinion." As the children sat on the grass near the shallow end, folding paper boats and setting them afloat, Daniel turned to Linda. "I want to ask, has anyone at the club given you problems since last week?" She hesitated. "Not directly. But people talk. They stop talking when I walk by." "Typical," Daniel said. "Lakeview likes its staff invisible. That's going to change." Linda frowned. "Mr. Sterling, I've worked here long enough to know how this world runs. You change one thing, they'll find another reason to look down on us. Then we'll give them something worth looking up to," he said. For a moment she simply stared at him, unsure how to respond. His certainty was both comforting and dangerous. Rebecca appeared then, moving with forced calm. "Mr. Sterling," she said sweetly. "So good to see you again." Daniel's smile was polite but thin. "Miss Hillman, I wanted to apologize once more for the misunderstanding earlier, and to let you know the board appreciates your generosity." He raised an eyebrow. "My generosity?" "Yes. Bringing attention to those less fortunate. Very inspiring." Her tone dripped with rehearsed admiration. "In fact, Mrs. Field suggested a photo op perhaps for the club's newsletter? A story about your philanthropy." Daniel stared at her for a moment before answering. "You mean a story to make you all look compassionate?" Rebecca's smile faltered. "Well, I don't need a photograph," he interrupted quietly. "I need a conscience, something this place seems to have lost." He turned away, kneeling beside the children. Anna was showing Ethan how to draw waves around their paper boats. "You see," she told him, "the waves make the boat strong. If you don't draw them, it looks like it's floating in nothing." Ethan nodded seriously and copied her lines. Daniel looked at them both, then back at Rebecca. "There's your photo," he said. "Two children, one rich, one poor, teaching each other something about life. But that won't sell your newsletter, will it?" Rebecca's cheeks flamed. "Mr. Sterling, I only..." "Enough." His voice was soft but final. "If you want to keep your position, treat every worker here with respect. And if I hear one more whisper about that family, you're done." She opened her mouth, then thought better of it and walked away. Linda exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to do that for us." I didn't," Daniel said. "I did it for me, for Ethan." As the sun began to sink, he sat on the grass beside the children. Linda joined them, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt something close to peace. The simple joy of two kids laughing, water shimmering, the sound of wind moving through trees, these were things money couldn't buy. But peace never lasted long in worlds built on pride. That evening, as the Sterling car rolled away from the club, Rebecca made another call. Her voice trembled but steady enough for deceit. "Mrs. Fields," she said, "I think you should know the Johnson girl. She's been hanging around Mr. Sterling's son a lot. Some of the members are starting to talk. It might not be appropriate." She paused, listening. "Yes, ma'am, I'll handle it. But perhaps we should consider letting the staff go before this gets out of hand." The next morning, a notice appeared on the employee bulletin board. "Effective immediately, the position of Miss Linda Johnson will be under review due to staffing adjustments." When Linda saw it, her heart sank. Anna tugged her sleeve. Mama, what's wrong? Linda forced a smile. Nothing, baby. Let's just finish today, okay? But her hands trembled as she picked up her mop. Far across the city, Daniel sat in his office reviewing new club policies when his phone buzzed. It was Claire, his assistant. Sir, I just received word that a staff member named Linda Johnson has been put under investigation for misconduct at Lakeview. Daniel's jaw set. Misconduct? That's what the memo says. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Get the car. Now, for Daniel Sterling, patience had always been a weapon. But this time, the weapon slipped from his hand. There was no patience left, only a quiet, rising anger. The black sedan pulled up to Lakeview Country Club with a low growl that made every valet straighten. Daniel Sterling stepped out before the driver could open the door. His expression carved from stone. He moved fast, his stride long, each step echoing across the marble drive like a warning bell. The morning sun glinted off his cufflinks. The only bright thing about him, Rebecca Hillman was waiting near the reception desk, clutching a folder and pretending she wasn't shaking. Mr. Sterling, she began. I was just about to call your office. He didn't stop walking. Where's Linda Johnson? Sir, if I may. Where? In the staff wing, she said quickly. But please, if this is about the review notice, I assure you it's just routine. Daniel turned sharply, his gaze so cold that her words died in her throat. A woman saves my child, and a week later she's under investigation? That's your definition of routine? Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. There have been concerns. Some members feel uncomfortable. The board received anonymous complaints that she was uncomfortable, Daniel repeated. You mean, people don't like that I had lunch with her? I will. Save it. He strode toward the staff corridor, his polished shoes silent on the carpet. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paint. At the far end, he found Linda bent over a cart, her back stiff, her uniform freshly pressed. She looked up, startled. Mr. Sterling, she said softly. You shouldn't be back here. I go where I please, he said. His voice was steady, but there was steel beneath it. What's this about you being under review? Her eyes darted toward the camera mounted near the ceiling. Sir, please. They can hear everything. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. Then let them. She straightened, setting her cloth aside. It's nothing I can't handle. They said the club's restructuring, that some positions might be removed. And you believe that? Linda's jaw clenched. I've seen it before. A complaint from a member, a rumor, a whisper, and suddenly you're gone. Doesn't matter how long you've worked. Daniel felt his chest tighten. You're not going anywhere. I'll make sure of that. She shook her head. You can't fix the way people see us, Mr. Sterling. He studied her face, tired, proud, unbroken. Maybe not. But I can make sure they face the truth. Behind him, footsteps clicked rapidly. Rebecca had followed, smiling tightly as if she were still in control. Mr. Sterling, I'm sure we can resolve this quietly. I don't want quiet, Daniel said. I want accountability. He turned to Linda. You deserve better than this. Both of you. Rebecca's voice wavered. Sir, I really must insist that this conversation take place in private. Then you can join me in the boardroom, he said, already walking away. Within half an hour, the senior staff and board members were gathered around the long mahogany table overlooking the golf course. Sunlight poured through the windows, too bright for the tension in the room. Daniel stood at the head, sleeves rolled up, the Lakeview employee file spread open before him. He began without preamble. You all know who I am. You also know why I'm here. Last week, my son was nearly killed in that pool while half of you drank champagne 20 feet away. No. A murmur ran through the room. He continued. He was saved by a little girl named Anna Johnson, 7 years old, the daughter of an employee you just tried to fire. Mrs. Fields adjusted her pearls. Mr. Sterling, no one tried to fire anyone. There were procedural cover-ups, he cut in. Anonymous complaints, conveniently timed, conveniently vague. That's what Lakeview does best. Pretend the problem doesn't exist. Mr. Hammond leaned forward. Daniel, with all respect, this is a private establishment. There are standards. Daniel's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. Standards? You mean segregation? Just dressed up with better vocabulary. The room went silent. He gestured toward the window, where the staff could be seen pushing cleaning carts in the Sunday. Those people out there make this place work. Without them, Lakeview is nothing but grass and stone. And yet, the moment one of them crosses the invisible line, saves a child, speaks too loudly, exists where they don't belong, you call it misconduct. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Sterling, perhaps we can revisit this after tempers have— Sit down, Daniel said, not raising his voice but commanding enough that she obeyed instantly. He looked around the table. Effective immediately, every employee review process will go through my office. No anonymous complaints. No member discomfort clauses. If you have an issue, you put your name on it. Mr. Hammond frowned. That's not how we've operated. Then maybe it's time we change. Silence followed. No one argued. When the meeting ended, Daniel stepped outside into the sunlight. His chest still burned. But for the first time since the incident, he felt the faintest sense of control. The truth had cracked through the polished marble walls of Lakeview, even if just a little. He found Linda waiting near the gate. Anna sat beside her, drawing again. Her notebook balanced on her knees. Mr. Sterling? Linda asked carefully. Should I be worried? He shook his head. Not anymore. They won't touch you. Her shoulders sagged in relief. Thank you. Anna looked up. Did you make them be nice? Daniel smiled faintly. Something like that. She grinned, then held out her drawing. Look, I made a new picture. It's the pool, but nobody's mean this time. He took it carefully. The sketch showed blue water, bright sun, smiling faces, hers, Ethan's, and his own, standing side by side. Do you think the world can ever be like this? He asked softly. Anna considered. It can, if grown-ups stop being scared. Her answer hit him harder than he expected. That evening, Daniel returned home to find Ethan waiting at the window. The boy's hands were pressed against the glass. His toy boat lined up beside him. Anna? He asked. She's fine, Daniel said. So is her mom. Ethan turned toward him, and for the first time, stepped forward to hug his father. The gesture was awkward, tentative but real. Daniel closed his eyes, holding his son close, feeling the tremor of his small heart against his chest. You're safe, he whispered. We both are. In the quiet that followed, Daniel realized he had crossed a line too, one no money or influence could erase. He had chosen sides. The following days at Lakeview moved like heavy air before a storm. No one spoke openly, but whispers slid through the marble halls like the rustle of dry leaves. Staff nodded politely to Daniel but avoided his eyes. Members smiled too quickly, their greetings stiff with caution. Everyone knew the balance of power had shifted, and no one was sure how far the cracks would spread. Daniel arrived each morning without warning. Sometimes he came with Ethan, sometimes alone. Always walking the same path by the pool. Pausing at the water's edge, the staff learned to scatter quietly when they saw him, as though afraid his presence might drag truth from their throats. On the fourth morning, Rebecca Hillman waited for him near the cabana. Her hair was perfectly styled, her voice too sweet. Mr. Sterling, she began. I've taken your directives to heart. I wanted you to know the staff review system has been adjusted as you requested. Daniel stopped but didn't look at her. Good. I hope, she added carefully. You understand my position. I was only trying to protect the club's reputation. He finally met her eyes. The club's reputation doesn't mean much when a 7-year-old has to remind us what decency looks like. Rebecca swallowed hard. I understand. He started to walk away, but her voice trembled after him. Sir, if I may, there's talk among the members. Some feel you've overcorrected. They're unhappy. Daniel turned, his tone calm but cutting. Do you know what makes me unhappy, Miss Hillman? Watching a child drown while adults sip champagne. She fell silent, her face pale. As Daniel continued toward the garden path, he spotted Linda and Anna near the maintenance shed. Anna was crouched over a small puddle, floating paper boats she had made from napkins. Ethan stood beside her, quiet but attentive, as if her laughter pulled him out of his silence. Look, Ethan, Anna said, nudging one boat forward. That's you. This one's me. We're racing. Ethan hesitated, then blew gently across the surface. His boat drifted past hers. Anna gasped. Hey, you cheated, she said, but her grin said otherwise. Daniel stood watching them for a long moment, something unspoken warming his chest. He could almost hear his late wife's voice beside him, gentle, teasing. See, Daniel? He just needed someone who spoke his language. Linda approached quietly, her voice low. He smiles more now. Daniel nodded. She brings it out of him. She sees him. Linda looked at him carefully. And what do you see, Mr. Sterling? He thought for a moment. I see everything I forgot to be grateful for. A soft wind brushed through the trees, carrying the faint sound of children's laughter. For a brief second, Lakeview didn't feel like a fortress of wealth. It felt like a place where something human had managed to survive. But peace, Daniel had learned, always carried a shadow. That afternoon, he received a call from his assistant, Claire. Sir, there's been an issue. A video circulating online security footage from the pool incident. Daniel stiffened. Show me. Within minutes, the video appeared on his phone. Grainy, shaky, but unmistakable. It showed Ethan being shoved into the water, the crowd laughing, and Anna diving in after him. There were gasps, then silence. The clip ended with Daniel arriving, holding his son, anger carved into every line of his face. The view count climbed as he watched. 30,000. 50. 100,000. The caption read, Rich boy pushed. Poor girl saves him. Lakeview Club scandal. Daniel's stomach twisted. This wasn't justice. This was spectacle. He called Claire again. Find out who leaked this. Already on it, sir. But it might not be bad publicity. People are calling you a hero for defending that family. I'm not a hero, Daniel muttered. I just did what anyone should have done. Well, not everyone did, Claire replied gently. That's the point. By evening, the news had reached every major outlet. Cameras appeared outside the club gates, journalists shouting questions at the staff. Some guests canceled memberships, others arrived furious, accusing Daniel of ruining Lakeview's prestige. Inside her office, Rebecca Hillman was pacing, her phone buzzing nonstop. Mrs. Fields had sent 3 messages in all caps. Contain this now. Rebecca called the only person who might listen. Mr. Sterling, we need to discuss strategy. She began nervously. The video's out of control. Reporters are calling this an example of elitist cruelty. They're demanding statements. Daniel's voice was calm. Then give them one. Nah. What should I say? The truth, he said simply. Say what happened. A child was bullied, another child saved him, and a room full of adults did nothing. Rebecca swallowed. That will destroy the club's reputation. He paused. Maybe it needs to be destroyed. That night, Daniel sat in Ethan's room, the glow of city lights spilling through the window. Ethan was asleep, his breathing soft, the blue toy boat resting on his chest. Daniel traced the edge of the paper Anna had given him, the drawing of smiling faces by the pool. He thought of all the years he had built walls around himself, around his wealth, around his son. Those walls had kept the world out, but they had also kept compassion out. It had taken one frightened little girl to break through them. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. You're making a mistake. Some things are better left buried. He stared at the message, then deleted it. The next morning, he would hold a press conference. He'd already decided. He would speak openly about what had happened, not as a billionaire, but as a father. Outside, the sky darkened over the hills. The pool at Lakeview gleamed faintly in the distance under the floodlights, smooth and deceptive. Like a mirror reflecting everything people wanted to hide, Daniel whispered into the silence. "We can't hide anymore." Down the hill, Anna sat on the steps outside her small apartment, humming softly as she folded a new paper boat. On its side, in careful childish handwriting, she wrote a single word: hope. By sunrise, the video had spread beyond Lakeview and into the bloodstream of America. Morning talk shows replayed the grainy clip again and again, the shove, the splash, the laughter, the small blur of a girl diving in. It ran under bold headlines: Wealth and Cruelty. The viral moment that shook Lakeview. Daniel woke to the sound of his phone vibrating across the nightstand. His inbox overflowed with messages: reporters, executives, colleagues, even politicians. Some congratulated him for doing the right thing. Others warned him to stay silent. He ignored them all. Instead, he stood at the window of his study, watching the pale dawn creep over the hills. Ethan sat on the carpet behind him, lining up toy blocks, humming softly. "You okay, buddy?" Daniel asked. Ethan didn't answer. But when Daniel turned, he saw that his son had built 2 towers, each topped with a paper boat, one blue, one red. "Anna," Ethan said quietly, touching the red one. Daniel knelt beside him, the lump in his throat unexpected. "Yes, son, that's Anna." The boy looked up, eyes wide and steady. "She helped." Daniel nodded. "She did. That morning, he put on a dark gray suit, not the polished armor of a corporate giant, but something simpler, quieter. His reflection in the mirror looked tired, older. He didn't mind. He wanted the world to see a father, not a figurehead. At 10 o'clock sharp, he stepped out of his car in front of Lakeview Country Club. A swarm of cameras and microphones met him instantly. "Mr. Sterling, is it true your son was attacked? Was the club negligent? Do you plan to press charges?" He raised a hand. "I'll answer everything inside." The ballroom had been transformed into an impromptu press hall. Rows of chairs filled the marble floor, flashes from cameras glinting off the chandeliers. The same members who once sipped champagne by the pool now sat rigid, whispering behind manicured hands. Daniel took the podium. He didn't carry notes. He didn't need any. "Last week," he began, "my 5-year-old son was pushed into the pool at this club by a group of children. He could have died." The words came out steady but cold. He was saved by a girl named Anna Johnson, 7 years old, the daughter of one of our housekeepers. The room shifted uncomfortably. He let the silence sit until no one could ignore it. "When that happened," he continued, "no one moved. Not a lifeguard, not a guest, not even the management. The only person who acted was a little girl who had nothing to gain and everything to lose." He glanced toward the back of the room where Linda and Anna stood together, small and quiet amid the spectacle. Anna clutched her mother's hand tightly, her big brown eyes fixed on him. Daniel went on. "That video has gone viral. People are calling it many things: a scandal, a symbol, a story about race or class or privilege. But it's really a story about something simpler. It's about the cost of looking away." He paused, his voice softening. "My son is autistic. He sees the world differently. He doesn't always understand cruelty, but he understands kindness. When he talks about that day, he doesn't remember the push. He remembers the hand that pulled him up." The room had gone completely still. "I'm not here to protect reputations," Daniel said. "I'm here to protect what's left of our humanity." Reporters raised hands, questions flying at once. "Mr. Sterling, are you suing the club? Will the board resign? Is it true you're establishing a charity?" He took a breath. "Yes. Effective immediately, Sterling Industries will fund a new foundation, the Anna Project, dedicated to supporting children with autism and the families who raise them, as well as teaching empathy in schools. Because courage like hers shouldn't be rare." The flashbulbs exploded like lightning. When the press conference ended, the crowd surged forward. Some applauded. Others slipped out quickly, unwilling to meet his eyes. Linda approached hesitantly, Anna half hiding behind her skirt. "You didn't have to say my name," Linda said softly. "Yes, I did," Daniel replied. "You deserve to be seen." Anna looked up at him. "There were so many people, Mr. Sterling. I was scared." He knelt so they were eye level. "You were brave again today." She smiled nervously. "Ethan's gonna see it on TV. I think he'll like that," Daniel said, smiling back. As they left the ballroom, a woman brushed past them, a member in pearls, eyes sharp. "You're turning this place into a circus," she hissed at Daniel. He stopped. "Ma'am, the circus was already here. I just turned on the lights." The woman flushed and hurried off. Outside, the reporters still waited, calling questions. Daniel shielded Anna and Linda as they walked toward the car. When the door closed and the noise faded, Linda let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You just made a lot of enemies, Mr. Sterling," she said quietly. "Then I must be doing something right." That evening, the news cycle exploded. Every channel ran clips of the press conference. Commentators debated his motives. Was he sincere or performing damage control? But the story had taken a life of its own. Hashtags flooded social media. Number the Anna Project. Number courage has no price. Number Lakeview Truth. At home, Daniel sat beside Ethan, who watched the news on a tablet. When the image of Anna appeared, her small face looking nervous but brave, Ethan reached out and touched the screen. "Friend," he said softly. Daniel's throat tightened. "Yes, son. She's your friend." He turned off the tablet and looked out at the hills, glowing under the sunset. For years, his world had been built on control, on hiding mess, avoiding scandal, keeping everything spotless. But sometimes you had to break the surface for the truth to breathe. Far across the city, Anna sat with her mother in their small kitchen, watching the same broadcast. Her name scrolled across the screen in bold letters. She giggled, half in disbelief. "Mama, they said my name." Linda smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Yes, baby, they did." Anna tilted her head. "You think rich people can change?" Linda hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe. One just did." 3 days after the press conference, Lakeview felt different. The air had changed. The silence that once cloaked the marble halls had cracked open into something raw, conversations that weren't whispers anymore. Eyes that didn't look away. But under that new honesty was tension, taut as wire. Daniel knew he'd stirred something that couldn't be undone. The board had been polite in public, furious in private. He didn't care. For the first time in years, his decisions weren't about profit or image. They were about truth. He spent the morning in his downtown office reviewing proposals for the Anna Project. The initiative had caught fire overnight. Donations poured in. Letters from parents across the country thanking him for finally saying what needed to be said. But there were also hate mails, accusations of virtue, signaling, calls for boycotts. He skimmed one email that read, "Stick to business, Sterling. Nobody wants a billionaire preaching morality." He deleted it without a second thought. "Sir?" Claire, his assistant, appeared in the doorway. "There's someone waiting in the lobby. Says she won't leave unless she talks to you." "Who is it?" "Linda Johnson." He straightened immediately. "Send her in." A moment later, Linda stepped into the glass-walled office, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She looked smaller against the backdrop of chrome and skyline, but her eyes were steady. "Mrs. Johnson," Daniel said, rising to greet her. "I didn't expect—" "I know," she said quietly. "But I couldn't just watch all this on TV and say nothing." He gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." She did, but didn't relax. "You changed our lives, Mr. Sterling. You gave my daughter a voice. But now people look at us differently. Some with kindness, some with envy, some with hate. I just needed you to know what that feels like." Daniel nodded slowly. "I imagine it feels heavy." "It does. We can't walk down the street without someone pointing, saying, 'That's her, the girl from the video.' Anna's only 7. She doesn't understand why strangers want pictures of her." "I'm sorry," he said softly. "That was never my intention." Linda exhaled. "I know, but it's bigger than you now." She paused, then added, "Still, I'm grateful. You told the truth when no one else would." Daniel sat back, thoughtful. Truth has a cost. I knew that when I spoke. And you're willing to pay it?" He looked toward the window, where sunlight glinted off skyscraper glass. "If I don't, what kind of example do I set for my son?" Linda smiled faintly. "Then maybe we're both raising our children right." The door opened then, and Ethan peeked in. He'd come straight from therapy, clutching a small puzzle piece in one hand. "Papa," he said softly. "Anna?" Daniel smiled. "Not today, son. She's at school." Ethan frowned, looking at Linda. "Mama Anna." Linda chuckled. Close enough. Daniel watched the exchange, warmth softening his voice. He remembers everyone who matters. After Linda left, Daniel couldn't shake her words. "It's bigger than you now." She was right. The movement he'd sparked had grown beyond his control. People were protesting outside country clubs, tagging photos of lavish parties with captions like, "How many Annas had to clean this room?" Somewhere between hope and chaos, truth had turned into reckoning. That afternoon, he drove without his driver, choosing the long road back to the staff quarters. The building stood quiet beneath the slanting light, laundry fluttering like flags of quiet resistance. He parked, stepped out, and followed the sound of children's laughter. Anna was in the courtyard, drawing with chalk on the cracked concrete bright suns, flowers, stick figures holding hands. When she saw him, her face lit up. "Mr. Sterling." "Hello, Anna. You came to visit?" she said, proud. "I told Mama you would." Linda appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. "Mr. Sterling, this is a surprise. I thought I'd see how my favorite artist is doing." Anna grinned. "I'm drawing my new school. We start next week." "New school?" Linda nodded. One of the foundation volunteers called. They found her a scholarship. She'll be going to Oak Ridge Elementary. Smaller classes, good teachers. And they have an art program. Daniel smiled, genuinely. "That's wonderful." Anna held up her chalk-stained hands. "It's because of the project, isn't it? The one with my name?" He crouched beside her. "Partly. But mostly because you earned it." She looked up at him with that serious expression children get when they don't fully understand the weight of the moment. "You think Ethan will come to school too one day?" "I hope so," Daniel said. "Maybe when he's ready." She nodded as if that settled it. "Then I'll save him a seat." Now, something caught in his throat. He stood, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Anna, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you jumped into that pool, weren't you scared?" She thought for a second. "A little. But Mama says you do the right thing even when it's scary. That's what makes it right." Daniel smiled faintly. "You're a wise girl. People say that a lot," she said proudly. "But mostly Mama says I talk too much." They laughed, and for a brief second, the world outside that cracked courtyard didn't matter. No headlines, no boardrooms, no reputations. Just sunlight, chalk dust, and the sound of a little girl giggling. When Daniel returned to his car, he paused, watching them from a distance. Linda standing in the doorway, Anna drawing a new picture. This one showed two people holding a rope across the water, pulling others to safety. He didn't need to ask who they were. That night, as Daniel tucked Ethan into bed, he placed one of Anna's drawings on the nightstand. "See this, buddy?" he said softly. "She's helping people. And we're going to do the same." Ethan touched the paper with his small hand. "Help," he whispered. Daniel nodded. "Help." Down the hall, in his study, he opened his laptop and began drafting a letter to every employee at Sterling Industries. It began simply, "No company can thrive where decency fails. Starting today, every Sterling property will adopt the same code. Respect first, rank second." He paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard, then added, "And if anyone forgets that, remember Anna Johnson." He hit send. The night outside was still, the city lights blinking like distant stars. Daniel leaned back in his chair. realizing for the first time that the world was already changing and so was he. The first day of Anna's new school began with sunlight pouring through thin clouds and the smell of freshly cut grass. Linda had pressed her daughter's uniform the night before, until every crease lay flat. She couldn't stop smiling as she brushed Anna's hair, tying the ribbons carefully. "You look like you belong there already," she said. Anna beamed. "Do you think Ethan will like my picture?" She held up the folded paper drawing she had made a giant sun over a blue lake. 2 paper boats, sailing side by side. "He'll love it," Linda said softly. "Now eat something before you run out of energy talking." At that same hour, in the hills above the city, Daniel was helping Ethan into a light sweater. His mornings had become gentler now, no rush, no assistants buzzing around. The world could wait. "We're visiting Anna's new school today," he said. "You remember her?" Ethan nodded, clutching his toy boat. "Anna Draw," he said. "Yes, she does, and she'd like to see you." The drive to Oak Ridge was quiet. Daniel watched his son in the rearview mirror, humming softly, eyes fixed on the clouds. He wondered what Ethan saw when he stared out like that: patterns, colors, a language the rest of them had forgotten how to speak. When they arrived, children were pouring through the gates, their laughter rising like music. Anna stood near the entrance, backpack slightly crooked, talking to another girl. When she saw Ethan, she waved so hard her ribbons bounced. "Ethan, Mr. Sterling." Ethan froze for a second, gripping his boat, then managed a small smile. Anna ran up to him. "You came." "Doubly." "Of course," Daniel said, smiling. "We promised." Anna crouched so she was eye level with Ethan. "I saved you a seat," she whispered. "You can sit next to me if you want." Ethan glanced toward his father. Daniel nodded gently. "Go ahead." The 2 children walked together toward the school garden. They didn't speak much, but their silence was comfortable. Anna showed him a small pond near the playground. "Look," she said. "Mini-fish." Ethan leaned closer, watching the tiny movements of silver in the water. "Swim," he whispered. "Yeah," she said. "They're free." Daniel watched from a distance, something tight in his chest loosening with every step they took. Linda stood beside him, arms folded. "She's happier here," she said. "She belongs here," he replied. "So does he someday." Linda smiled, turning toward him. "You really mean to make this permanent, don't you? The project, the changes, all of it." I do," Daniel said. "If you want to change the world, you start with one place, one rule. One act of kindness that doesn't end with you." Linda studied him for a moment. "You talk like a man who finally found peace." He smiled faintly. "Not peace, just purpose." A bell rang, and the children hurried inside. Ethan hesitated at the door, then turned to wave at his father. Daniel raised a hand, smiling. Anna grabbed Ethan's sleeve and whispered something that made him laugh, a small, quick laugh, like the first note of a song. For Daniel, that sound was worth every headline, every threat, every sleepless night. Later that day, as he walked through his office, he noticed something new. The employees greeted him differently, not with forced politeness, but genuine warmth. A receptionist stopped him to say her nephew had autism and that she'd joined the Anna Project as a volunteer. A janitor shyly thanked him for speaking for people like us. Daniel didn't know what to say, except, "It's not me. It's her." By afternoon, the press had shifted focus. The story was no longer scandal but inspiration. Talk shows ran segments titled, "The Girl Who Changed a Billionaire." Donations to the foundation had doubled overnight. But fame came with shadows. As Daniel returned home that evening, his security guard handed him a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single printed message. "You've humiliated powerful people. Walk away before you regret it." He stared at it for a moment, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer. Fear was familiar. It had kept him cautious all his life. But not anymore. That night, he drove back to Oak Ridge, parking near the empty playground. He saw Linda and Anna sitting on a bench under the dim lights, sharing a sandwich wrapped in foil. Anna was chattering about her day, how her art teacher liked her drawing, how she wanted to paint the pond. Danielle approached quietly. "Working late, young lady?" Anna grinned. "Just telling Mama everything." Linda smiled. "We were just about to head home." "How's Ethan?" "Peaceful," Daniel said. "He's drawing again. Boats, mostly." Anna's eyes lit up. "Can I see one?" Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "He made this tonight." It was simple, 2 stick figures standing by the water, one holding a toy boat. Anna gasped softly. "That's me." "Yes," Daniel said, his voice low. "He doesn't draw people often." "You're special." Anna studied the drawing, her small fingers tracing the blue crayon lines. "He's special too," she said firmly. "People just need to be patient." Linda's eyes softened. She's always believed that. Daniel looked between them, this mother and daughter who had stepped into his world without fear, without calculation, and felt something settle inside him. Gratitude. Responsibility. Love, even, though not the romantic kind. A love for truth, for courage. Before they parted, Anna said, "Mr. Sterling?" "Yes?" "When people were mean about us, Mama said they just didn't know better." "You think that's true?" He crouched beside her. "Sometimes, Anna, people know better. They just forget to care." She nodded slowly, as if memorizing it. "Then we'll help them remember." He smiled. "I think you already are." As Daniel drove home through the quiet streets, he realized that for the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about money, meetings, or mergers. He was thinking about a little girl's promise, and how maybe, just maybe, the world could change one memory at a time. At home, he checked on Ethan, who was asleep with the blue boat resting beside his pillow. Daniel stood there in the soft glow of the nightlight and whispered, "You have a friend now. And because of her, your father finally has one too." The boy stirred, smiling faintly in his sleep. Outside, a soft wind rippled the curtains, gentle, steady, like the sound of small waves against a pool's edge. By the time autumn rolled into the valley, Lakeview Country Club no longer looked untouched. The manicured perfection that once defined it had started to fade, replaced by something more human and more complicated. A few of the longtime members had resigned, offended by the new atmosphere. Others stayed but grumbled that the place had lost its exclusivity. Yet among the staff, quiet pride was blooming like spring after drought. Daniel arrived one cool morning, the air smelling faintly of wet leaves. He parked near the staff gate, ignoring the main entrance as always. It felt right to walk among the people who actually kept the place alive. "Morning, Mr. Sterling," called Carlos, the maintenance man, as he rolled a cart of cleaning supplies across the path. "Morning, Carlos," Daniel replied with a smile. "How's the family?" "Good, sir. My son's applying to that new scholarship program your foundation started." Daniel nodded. "Tell him to use my name as a reference." Carlos grinned. "Thank you, sir." Inside, Rebecca Hillman was waiting for him, posture sharp as glass. "Mr. Sterling," she said carefully, "I've just been informed that the board intends to hold a private session this week to discuss certain financial concerns." "Concerns about what?" "The foundation," she said. "They think it's drawing too much attention. Some donors are reconsidering their membership fees. They believe Lakeview is becoming a political statement instead of a retreat." Daniel crossed his arms. "It's becoming decent. If that's too political, they can take their fees somewhere else." Rebecca's lips tightened. "You're risking everything this club was built on." He met her gaze. "That's the idea." Later that afternoon, Daniel drove to Oak Ridge Elementary. Anna's art class had invited him to see their latest project murals painted by the students about kindness and courage. He stepped into the classroom quietly, not wanting to interrupt. The walls were alive with color. Paintings of smiling faces, open hands, and bright suns covered every surface. But one mural stopped him cold. A deep blue background with 2 small figures floating in the water, one reaching down, the other reaching up. Across the top, painted in bright yellow letters, were the words, "We help each other rise." Anna spotted him near the door and waved so hard that blue paint streaked across her cheek. "Mr. Sterling, do you like it?" "I love it," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "Did you paint this one?" She nodded proudly. "The teacher said we could paint something true." He crouched down to study it closer. "You painted truth all right." From the corner of the room, the teacher approached, smiling. "You must be Mr. Sterling. Anna talks about you and Ethan often." "You've inspired quite a lot around here." Daniel smiled awkwardly. "It's really Anna who's done the inspiring." After class, Linda thanked him for coming, her tone light but weary. "They want to put her mural in the local paper," she said. "She's excited. But I worry. The more people notice us, the more they look for something to tear down." Daniel understood. Fame is a strange shadow. It can warm you or burn you. "Has it burned you?" she asked. He looked away toward the playground, where Anna and Ethan were now sitting under a tree, trading crayons. "Sometimes," he said. "But I've learned not to hide from the fire." The next morning, the board meeting at Lakeview began in the old oak-paneled conference room. Daniel sat at the head of the table. Across from him, Mrs. Fields and Mr. Hammond wore the expressions of people preparing for battle. "Daniel," Hammond began, voice low but sharp. "We've reviewed the club's financial reports. Membership renewals are down 12%. Several donors have redirected their support to other establishments. Because they can't stand the sight of fairness," Daniel said calmly. "Because they see you turning a private club into a social experiment." Mrs. Fields shot back. "You've made this place a symbol of guilt." Daniel leaned forward. "Maybe guilt is what we needed. The truth was always here. We just pretended not to see it." "You're ruining decades of tradition," Hammond said. Daniel's tone hardened. "Tradition doesn't mean much if it's built on exclusion." Mrs. Fields slammed her notebook shut. "You can't run this club by yourself." "I don't intend to," he said. "But I'll make sure whoever does believes people are worth more than their memberships." When the meeting adjourned, the room was heavy with silence. As the board members left, Rebecca lingered in the doorway. "You know they'll try to push you out," she said quietly. "Let them try," Daniel replied. "I've already won." That evening, Daniel returned home late. Ethan was asleep on the couch, clutching a small notebook Anna had given him. On the first page was a drawing of a blue boat and a red one. Side by side under a yellow sundae, above it, in Anna's handwriting, were the words, "For Ethan, so you never feel alone." Daniel sat beside his son, running a hand through his hair. "You're not alone, buddy," he whispered. "Not anymore." The next day brought new trouble. The news networks reported that several wealthy members of Lakeview had filed a lawsuit against the club, claiming emotional distress and defamation. Their lawyers accused Daniel of weaponizing private property for social propaganda. Claire called him as soon as the story broke. "Sir, we need a response." Daniel looked out at the horizon from his office window, the city gleaming beneath a pale sunset. "Write this down," he said. "We will not be intimidated by those who mistake privilege for pain. The Anna Project stands for truth, and truth will outlast money." When the statement hit the press, the backlash was immediate, and so was the support. Letters flooded in from parents, teachers, and veterans who saw something sacred in the fight. That night, as Daniel read through them, he came across one written in careful cursive. "Dear Mr. Sterling, my name is Harold. I'm 72 years old. I grew up working the same kind of jobs those people try to forget exist. Thank you for reminding the world that kindness isn't weakness. It's courage." Daniel folded the letter slowly, feeling its weight in his hands. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain. The storm that had been gathering since the night of the pool incident was finally breaking, but this time, he wasn't afraid of getting wet. By late October, the air over the valley grew heavy with rain clouds, the kind that turned the sunlight gray and the hills silver. Lakeview Country Club, once pristine and untouchable, stood quiet, its polished facade hiding the tension inside. The lawsuit filed by the members had become national news, dividing opinion across the country. Talk shows argued over whether Daniel Sterling was a visionary or a traitor to his class. Daniel didn't watch the coverage anymore. He knew the truth. Change was never clean. It always left a mess before it made sense. On a Thursday morning, he sat in his home office, papers scattered across the desk, legal briefs, foundation reports, and a half-written speech for the charity gala scheduled for the weekend. He stared at the blinking cursor, unable to find the first line. His mind drifted instead to the last image he had of Anna and Ethan, two children sharing crayons under a tree, drawing a world better than the one the adults had given them. Claire's voice cut through his thoughts from the intercom. "Sir, there's a visitor. She says it's urgent." He rubbed his temples. "Who?" "Rebecca Hillman." Daniel hesitated, then sighed. "Send her in." Rebecca entered quietly, her face pale, her hands clasped around a folder. "Mr. Sterling, I wouldn't have come if it wasn't serious." He gestured for her to sit. "Go on." She took a breath. "The lawsuit. It's not just the members. There's a group of investors trying to remove you from ownership. They're claiming you've misused company funds to support the foundation. They want your resignation from the Sterling Industries board." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "And you're telling me this because I thought you should hear it from someone who doesn't hate you." Her voice cracked slightly. "You've made enemies, Mr. Sterling. Powerful ones." He studied her for a long moment. "And where do you stand in all this, Miss Hillman?" She swallowed. "I stood on the wrong side for too long. I don't want to make that mistake again." For the first time, Daniel saw something unguarded in her eyes, fear, maybe even regret. He nodded slowly. "Then tell the truth, Rebecca. When this goes public, tell them exactly what happened that night. Every detail." "I will," she said softly. "But it won't stop them from coming after you." Daniel smiled faintly. "They can take my money, my seat, my company, but they can't take my conscience." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Meanwhile, across town, Linda was folding laundry when Anna burst through the door, dripping from the rain, clutching a crumpled flyer. "Mama, look!" Linda took the paper, reading the bold letters across the top. "The Anna Project Gala. Celebrating acts of courage. Mr. Sterling invited us," Anna said breathlessly. "The teacher gave these out. He said we're the guests of honor." Linda's heart fluttered. "Guests of honor? Uh-huh. I get to wear a dress." Linda smiled, but her stomach twisted. Public attention had brought them opportunity. Yes, but also danger. "We'll see, baby," she said gently. "Let's just wait and see." The night of the gala arrived 2 days later. The event was held at the City Museum, all marble floors and chandeliers. Outside, rain fell steady, streaking the windows like silver threads. Inside, the atmosphere shimmered with tension, half admiration, half resentment. Wealthy donors mingled with school teachers and community leaders, an unlikely mix under one roof. Daniel arrived in a dark suit, no tie, a quiet symbol that this night wasn't about him. When Linda and Anna entered, the crowd turned. Anna wore a pale yellow dress and shiny shoes that were slightly too big. She looked both nervous and radiant, clutching a small bouquet of daisies someone had given her. Daniel walked over, smiling warmly. "You look like sunshine on a rainy night." Anna giggled. "That's 'cause I'm brave." "You certainly are," he said. Linda nodded politely. "You sure you want us here, Mr. Sterling? There are people staring like we don't belong." He lowered his voice. "Then maybe they're the ones who don't." When he took the stage, the room hushed. Cameras clicked, and the lights dimmed slightly. Daniel glanced down at the note cards in his hand, then set them aside. "I had a speech written," he began, "but I realized I don't need one. You all know the story that brought us here. A child fell into a pool. Another child jumped in to save him, and the world stopped to argue about what it meant." He paused, scanning the crowd. "But it's simple. It meant that decency isn't extinct. It meant that courage still lives in the hearts of children who haven't yet learned to look away." Anna's eyes shone from her seat near the front. Daniel smiled at her before continuing. "I've been called foolish, political, even dangerous for standing by this story. But the truth is, I didn't make anything happen. I just refused to ignore it. The real hero is a little girl who saw someone in need and didn't ask what it would cost her. Ah! A murmur of emotion rippled through the room. And because of her, Daniel said softly, hundreds of children now have therapy, scholarships, and a future. Because of her, my son smiles again. The audience stood, the sound of applause echoing through the grand hall. Linda wiped tears from her eyes. Anna beamed, hiding her face behind her bouquet. But in the back corner, two men in suits whispered to each other, their expressions cold. One of them pulled out a phone, snapping a photo of Daniel on stage. The storm outside cracked open, lightning flashing through the high windows. For a moment, it looked like the light itself was trying to tear through the darkness. Later that night, after the crowd had gone and the music faded, Daniel stood alone on the museum steps, rain soaking his hair. Linda and Anna waited by the car, calling for him, but he didn't move right away. He looked up at the sky, whispering to himself, "You can't undo truth. You can only face it." Behind him, through the glass doors, one of the men from the corner was watching, phone pressed to his ear, speaking quietly into the storm. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. By dawn the next morning, Daniel's phone was already buzzing. Headlines were everywhere. The billionaire who defied his own world. Lakeview lawsuit intensifies after gala. Can one act of kindness change a culture? The gala had gone viral overnight. Clips of his speech spread across social media, his voice steady. Anna's smiling face in the front row. Linda wiping away tears. The internet called it the moment the rich man found his soul. But behind the applause came the backlash. In the comments, praise mixed with venom. Fake charity from a hypocrite billionaire. Exploiting a little girl for PR. He's just trying to save his image. By noon, Daniel's PR director was in his office, pale and panicked. "Sir, the investors are furious. They're calling an emergency vote to suspend you as chairman of Sterling Industries. They think the foundation's becoming a liability." Daniel sat at his desk, calm but silent. The city stretching out behind him like a gray ocean. "Let them vote," he said finally. "I didn't build this company to spend my life apologizing for doing the right thing." The director hesitated. "You'll lose everything you've worked for." Daniel looked up. "Then maybe it's time I work for something better." Outside, rain still fell over the city, blurring the glass towers that once seemed invincible. Across town, Linda was cleaning rooms at the small hotel that had recently hired her part-time. Anna sat in the lobby with a stack of crayons and a notebook, drawing a huge sun over two little stick figures. When Linda finished her shift, she joined her daughter by the window. "You okay, baby?" Anna nodded. "People at school said they saw me on TV again. They said you're famous." Linda laughed softly. "Famous doesn't mean free, sweetheart. It just means more people know your name." Anna frowned. "Do you think Mr. Sterling's sad?" Linda hesitated. "I think he's learning how to be brave." "That's not the same thing." That afternoon, Daniel's car pulled up in front of their apartment. He looked tired, his eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. But when he saw Anna waving from the window, he managed to smile. She ran out barefoot, clutching another folded piece of paper. "Mr. Sterling, look what I made." He knelt down, accepting the drawing. It showed him standing between two houses, one big and one small, holding hands with a little girl and a boy. Above it, in colorful letters, she'd written, "We're all neighbors now." Daniel swallowed hard. "That's beautiful, Anna." She beamed. "I wanted to draw the truth." Linda stepped outside, drying her hands on a towel. "You look like you haven't slept, Mr. Sterling." He smiled faintly. "I haven't. The board's trying to push me out." Her expression softened. "You knew they'd fight back." "I did," he admitted. "But I didn't think I'd feel this calm about it." She tilted her head. "Calm?" He nodded. "For years, I let other people tell me who I was supposed to be. Now, for once, I know exactly who I am." Anna tugged his sleeve. "You're Ethan's dad," she said with perfect simplicity. Daniel laughed quietly. "Yes. And that's all that really matters." Back at Sterling headquarters, tension was mounting. The emergency board meeting began at 5 p.m., with a dozen executives seated around a gleaming table. Daniel entered last, taking his place at the head. "Mr. Sterling," said Hammond, the senior board member, "we'll make this brief. Your recent activities have damaged the company's reputation and destabilized investor confidence. Effective immediately. We're voting on your suspension as chairman." Daniel folded his hands. "Proceed." One by one, hands went up around the table. Hammond's, Fields's, the younger partners all in favor. Only Claire Reynolds, his assistant and proxy on the board, kept her hand down. When it was over, Hammond exhaled in triumph. "The motion passes. You're hereby relieved of your executive duties." Daniel stood slowly. "You've made your choice. But remember, this wealth without conscience isn't stability, it's decay." Mrs. Fields rolled her eyes. "Spare us the sermon, Daniel. You're not a savior." He smiled faintly. "No, I'm a father." He turned and walked out, ignoring the murmurs behind him. Outside the glass doors, the rain had stopped, but the pavement still shimmered. The air smelled like electricity and change. That evening, Daniel picked up Ethan from therapy. The boy climbed into the back seat, humming softly to himself, fingers tracing the window fog. "Papa," he said suddenly. "You sad?" Daniel met his son's reflection in the rearview mirror. "No, buddy. Just thinking." Ethan frowned. "You quiet." Daniel nodded. "Sometimes you have to lose something to find your voice." The boy seemed to consider this, then held up his blue toy boat. "Still floats," he said simply. Daniel smiled. "Yeah, it still floats." Later, when they arrived home, there was a small package waiting at the gate. Inside was a framed photo, one from the gala, of Daniel kneeling beside Anna as she smiled for the cameras. A handwritten note was taped to the corner. "Dear Mr. Sterling, thank you for showing the world that kindness isn't charity. It's courage. From a father who finally understands." Daniel stood there a long time. Rain dripping from the eaves, the letter softening in his hand. He thought of his own father, cold, distant. A man who'd believed emotions were weaknesses. Daniel had built his empire in the same image until a 7-year-old shattered it. The phone rang. It was Linda. "I saw the news," she said gently. "They voted you out." "They did. I'm sorry." "Don't be. I'm free now." There was a pause, then her voice softened. "You know, when Anna first jumped into that pool, I was terrified. But now I see maybe she wasn't just saving your son. Maybe she was saving all of us." Daniel looked toward Ethan's room, where the boy's laughter echoed faintly. "You might be right." Before hanging up, Linda added, "We're proud of you, Mr. Sterling, all three of us." That night, Daniel stood by the window, watching lightning flicker over the hills. His reflection stared back older, calmer, unburdened. For the first time in decades, he wasn't the CEO, the billionaire, or the man behind the brand. He was simply Daniel Sterling. A father, a believer, a man who'd finally stopped looking away. He smiled to himself, whispering into the quiet, "Still floats." Winter came early that year. The hills around Lakeview were dusted in silver frost, and the pool that had once reflected the cruelty of the privileged now sat empty, covered for the season like a wound finally healing. The lawsuit had faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals, but its echoes lingered in the whispers of those who still clung to the old order. Daniel Sterling's name no longer appeared on the Sterling Industries masthead. His office downtown was gone, his portrait removed from the boardroom wall. Yet, in the quiet rhythm of his new life, there was peace he'd never known before. He spent his mornings walking Ethan to therapy, his afternoons helping at the Anna Project Center, and his evenings surrounded by children who laughed freely, unbothered by status or name. On a cold Friday morning, the Foundation's first community center opened in a modest neighborhood near the edge of the city. The building wasn't grand white walls, wide windows, painted murals of sunlight and boats, but it felt alive. Dozens of families gathered in the courtyard, some holding cameras, others just curious. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze. Linda stood beside Daniel, wearing her best winter coat. Anna clutched the giant scissors in both hands, grinning with pride. "Can I really do it?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "You saved a life. I think you can handle a ribbon." She laughed, stepping forward as cameras clicked. "Okay, on 3. The crowd counted with her. 1, 2, 3, and the ribbon fell, the courtyard bursting into applause. Inside, the center buzzed with life. Volunteers showed parents classrooms for art therapy, reading spaces, and a small pool where children could learn to swim safely. Daniel walked through the rooms slowly, feeling something inside him settle. The pool's surface shimmered beneath the skylight, calm and forgiving. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" Linda said quietly, walking beside him. He nodded. "It used to remind me of what went wrong. Now it reminds me of what we fixed." Anna's laughter echoed from the art room. She was surrounded by younger children, teaching them how to fold paper boats. "You have to crease it right here," she said, demonstrating carefully. "Otherwise it sinks." Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching her. "She's going to lead people someday," he murmured. Linda smiled. "She already does." Later that afternoon, as the guests began to leave, a reporter approached Daniel with a microphone. "Mr. Sterling, do you regret anything? Losing your company, the lawsuit, the fallout?" Daniel considered the question, glancing toward Ethan and Anna, who were now painting together under the skylight. "Regret?" he said softly. "No, you only regret the things you were too afraid to do. Everything else is just learning." The reporter hesitated, then asked, "And what did you learn?" He smiled faintly. "That courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet voice saying, 'Do it anyway.'" The reporter lowered the mic, visibly moved. As the sun began to set, the courtyard filled with golden light. Families lingered, talking, laughing. Daniel walked outside, hands in his pockets, watching the sky turn shades of amber and rose. The sound of children playing drifted through the air like a hymn. "Papa," Ethan called, running toward him. His small hands were smeared with paint. "Anna said we're going to build a big boat for the pond." Daniel laughed. "A big boat, huh?" Anna ran up behind him, waving a sketchbook. "We'll name it Hope 2. The first one's at my school." He knelt, looking at their drawings, 2 small boats side by side, a sun above them, the words, "We all float together," written across the page in bright crayon. "That's perfect," he said. "Let's build it." As the evening cooled, Daniel walked with Linda to the gate. "You ever think about what would have happened if Anna hadn't been there that day?" she asked softly. He looked at her, the weight of memory settling on his face. "Every day, and every day I thank whatever grace sent her to that pool." Linda nodded. "Sometimes God doesn't send angels. He sends children." Daniel smiled, the words sinking deep. "And sometimes," he said, "they teach the angels how to swim." They laughed quietly, the sound mingling with the distant murmur of families heading home. Later that night, Daniel stood alone in the quiet of his study. The framed newspaper clipping from the gala hung on the wall. Billionaire turned advocate. But next to it, pinned higher, was Anna's old drawing, the one with 3 figures by the water. He reached out, tracing the faint crayon lines with his fingers. "Still floats," he whispered. From down the hall came Ethan's sleepy voice. "Papa, come tell a story." Daniel smiled and turned off the lamp. "Coming, buddy." In the boys' room, the toy boat still sat by the window, its paint chipped from years of handling. Daniel lay beside his son, the moonlight spilling across the floor. "What kind of story tonight?" Ethan yawned. "The pool one. The one with Anna?" "Yes." Daniel chuckled softly. "Okay. Once upon a time, a little boy fell into the water. And when everyone else stood still, one small girl jumped in, and because she did, the world started to breathe again." Ethan smiled, drifting toward sleep. "She brave." "She is," Daniel whispered, "and so are you." Outside, the wind carried the soft rustle of leaves across the city. Brushing over the hills, the closed pool, the new center, and the laughter of children learning how to swim. The world had not changed overnight, but in one small corner of it, decency had taken root. And that, Daniel knew, was enough. By early spring, the frost had melted, leaving Lakeview's hills drenched in soft green. Birds nested in the tall oaks again, and the pool, once a symbol of cruelty, was being refilled. But this time, it wasn't for the privileged, it was for the community. Under Daniel's quiet direction, Lakeview had been transformed into something new. A public center for charity events, inclusive swimming lessons, and after-school programs. The elite called it a tragedy. The local papers called it rebirth. On a bright Saturday morning, volunteers arrived early to repaint the walls. Among them were children from nearby schools, some rich, some poor, none of them caring about the difference. Linda stood at a table mixing paint, while Anna darted around with her brush, splattering blue streaks along the pool's edge. "Anna, that's enough ocean for today," Linda laughed. Anna grinned. "It's supposed to look like the sky's in the water." No. Daniel arrived just then, wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt instead of a suit. He carried a box of sandwiches in one hand and a thermos of hot cocoa in the other. Ethan walked beside him, clutching a smaller paintbrush. "Mr. Sterling," Anna called out, her voice echoing across the pool deck. "We're making it pretty again." Daniel smiled. "You're doing a fine job. Though I think you might have painted your shoes." She looked down at her sneakers, streaked blue and white, and shrugged. "That means I worked hard." Linda chuckled, shaking her head. "She's impossible. Impossible is how good things start," Daniel said warmly. They spent the morning painting, laughing, and breaking bread on the patio where laughter had once been cruel. At one point, Daniel stood quietly by the pool's edge, the water shimmering beneath the morning light. Ethan stood beside him, silent but peaceful, his reflection perfectly still. "Papa," Ethan whispered, "it's beautiful." Daniel smiled softly. "Yes, son. It is." By noon, volunteers gathered under a tent for lunch. A small local news crew arrived to film a segment about the reopening. When the reporter asked Daniel to speak, he waved them off. "Ask Anna," he said. The little girl blinked, startled. "Me? Who better?" he replied, kneeling beside her. "You started this." Anna looked at the camera nervously, then at Ethan, who gave a small nod of encouragement. Taking a deep breath, she said, "We just wanted everyone to be kind again. That's all. Nobody should ever be scared to fall." The reporter smiled. "That's very wise." Anna shrugged. "Mama says kindness is free, but people forget to spend it." The video clip spread across the internet that evening, millions of people replaying the moment, a child's voice, clear and simple, cutting through the noise of a cynical world. A week later, letters poured into the foundation. Teachers starting Kindness Week at their schools. Police officers volunteering for the swimming program, even former Lakeview members sending donations with quiet notes of apology. The story had become something larger than any of them. One afternoon, Daniel found Linda standing by the new community garden beside the pool. She had dirt on her gloves and a small smile on her face. "Never thought I'd see flowers here instead of champagne tables," she said. He smiled. "Every place can be reborn if you give it a reason." She studied him for a moment. "You seem lighter." "I am," he admitted. "When I lost everything, I found something that mattered." "What's that?" He looked toward the pool where Ethan and Anna were playing with toy boats, the water glimmering around them. "Faith," he said simply. Linda nodded slowly. "It suits you better than power ever did." That evening, Daniel drove home with Ethan asleep in the back seat. The road curved through the hills, glowing with late sunlight. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, the one who cared more about status than souls, who would have mistaken silence for strength. Now, he understood something deeper. Power meant nothing if it wasn't used to lift someone else. When they arrived home, Daniel tucked Ethan into bed. The boy's toy boat rested on the nightstand beside a new one painted half red, half blue, a gift from Anna. On the bottom she'd written, "We float better together." Daniel smiled at the words, whispering, "Yes, we do." A few weeks later, the foundation hosted its first national conference. Community leaders, teachers, and parents gathered to discuss empathy and education. Daniel opened the event with a brief speech not about wealth or policy, but about small acts of decency. Change doesn't start in boardrooms, he said. It starts in the moments no one sees, the moment someone decides not to look away. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Backstage afterward, Linda found him sitting quietly, lost in thought. "You spoke from the heart," she said. "I've learned it's the only part worth speaking from." Anna ran up, holding 2 name badges, one for herself, one for Ethan. "Look, we're helpers now," Daniel laughed, fastening the badge to her dress. "You've always been helpers." As the evening ended, the group gathered for a photo beneath the conference banner. Ethan stood beside Anna, holding the blue and red boat between them. Daniel stood behind them, one hand resting on each of their shoulders. The flash went off, freezing the moment forever, 3 lives changed by one act of courage. Later that night, as Daniel sat on his porch watching the moon ripple across the distant water, he thought about all the ripples that had followed that single splash, the laughter, the silence, the shame, the truth, and finally, the hope. No one could erase what had happened, but maybe that was the point. The past wasn't meant to be erased. It was meant to be learned from. He closed his eyes, whispering to the memory of that night. "We're still floating, Grace. All of us." In the quiet, the wind rustled the trees like the soft breath of the world exhaling relief. The ripples kept moving outward. Spring melted into summer again. 1 year since the night that had changed all their lives. Lakeview, now renamed the Riverside Learning Center, had become a place of laughter instead of whispers. Its hallways were filled with the sound of children running, volunteers greeting each other, and parents exchanging recipes near the community kitchen. The scent of chlorine still lingered, but it no longer carried pain, it carried memory. Daniel arrived early that morning, as he always did, to check on the center before classes began. The sun hung low and golden, reflecting off the pool where Anna and Ethan were already sitting with their feet in the shallow end. He watched them quietly for a moment, their small voices echoing across the still water. "Race you, Ethan," Anna said, releasing her toy boat. Ethan pushed his forward, smiling. "Blue wins," Anna giggled. "No fair, yours always wins." Daniel smiled to himself. "You two sound like old friends," he called. Anna turned. "We are old friends, almost a year." Linda appeared behind him carrying a basket of muffins for the morning volunteers. "Don't let them fool you," she said. "They argue like siblings," Daniel chuckled. "That's how you know they care." He walked along the deck, the sunlight warm on his face, and thought about how strange it felt to stand here again, same pool, same breeze, same sky, but everything was different. The ghosts of that cruel night had faded, replaced by something steady, alive, forgiving. Inside the main office, Claire was waiting with a brown envelope on the desk. "This came by courier," she said. "No return address." Daniel opened it and froze when he saw the handwriting. It was looping and elegant. From another lifetime, his late wife's mother, Eleanor. He unfolded the letter. "Daniel, I saw the news about your foundation. You've done something she would have been proud of. I still remember how my daughter used to say you had a good heart but kept it locked away. I think she'd say it's finally open now. Take care of that boy. And thank the little girl who reminded you who you were. With Grace, Eleanor." Daniel read it twice, his eyes blurring. When he looked up, the office seemed brighter, as though sunlight had found its way in through a crack only Grace could open. Later that morning, he gathered everyone by the pool: children, teachers, volunteers, even the maintenance staff. He held the letter in his hand. "I've been thinking a lot about where this all started," he said. "About what it means to truly change. A year ago, this pool was a place of pain. Now, it's a place of learning. That happened because one person refused to look away. Anna Johnson reminded us all that courage doesn't need permission." He turned to her. "Come here, Anna." She stepped forward shyly. "Yes? Mr. Sterling?" He handed her a small medal shaped like a paper boat, engraved with the words, "For courage and compassion." "Everyone here owes something to you," he said softly. "But I owe you the most. You didn't just save my son, you saved me." Anna blinked rapidly, holding back tears. "I didn't save anybody. I just did what Mama said was right." "That's what heroes always say," Daniel replied. The crowd applauded, and Anna grinned, clutching the medal to her chest. Linda wiped her eyes quietly, her hand trembling against her apron. After the ceremony, Daniel walked out to the garden where Linda was standing alone, watching the children play. "She's never going to forget this day," she said. "Neither will I," he answered. She looked at him thoughtfully. "You've changed more than this place, you know." Daniel smiled faintly. "I hope so. I want Ethan to grow up in a world that deserves him and her." Linda's eyes softened. "You built that world, piece by piece." He shook his head. "We all did. Even the ones who fought us." As if on cue, Rebecca Hillman approached from the far path, carrying a donation ledger. She looked different, less polished, more human. "Mr. Sterling," she said quietly, "I wanted to thank you for giving me a second chance. I've been volunteering here every week. It's good work." Daniel nodded. "Everyone deserves a chance to start over, Rebecca." She smiled faintly. "You taught me that afternoon." Daniel and Ethan sat under the oak tree beside the pool, watching Anna teach the younger kids how to fold paper boats. The air was soft and warm, the kind of day that made you believe in gentler futures. "Papa," Ethan said suddenly, "can we give her something?" Daniel looked down. "Like what?" Ethan thought for a moment, then held up his toy boat, the blue one, its paint chipped, edges worn from a year of love. "This," he said simply. Daniel hesitated. "Are you sure?" Ethan nodded. "She saved me. She should have it." Together, they walked over to Anna. She looked up, curious. "What's wrong?" Ethan held out the boat. "For you." Her eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded solemnly. "It floats good." She took it carefully, as if it were made of glass. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll keep it safe." Daniel watched, his throat tightening. He realized then that this was what healing looked like, not grand gestures or perfect endings, but small exchanges of grace between children who had never stopped believing in goodness. As the sun dipped low over the horizon, Linda gathered her things, calling for Anna. The girl turned to wave, the blue boat still in her hands. "Bye, Mr. Sterling. Bye, Ethan." "See you tomorrow," Ethan shouted back. They stood there a while, watching the Johnsons walk down the hill toward home. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called out a sound both lonely and alive. Daniel put his arm around his son. "You know," he said quietly, "when you throw a pebble into a pond, it makes ripples that go farther than you can see." Ethan looked up at him. "Anna's the pebble?" Daniel smiled. "We all are, buddy. We just have to decide what kind of ripples we leave behind." "Oh," the boy nodded thoughtfully, then whispered, "Good ones." "Good ones," Daniel repeated. They stood there as the last light faded over the water, the pool reflecting a sky that had once been witness to cruelty, but now held only peace. The world was still flawed, still unfair, but here, in this small corner of it, hope floated. Summer deepened, long days stretching like golden threads across the valley. The Riverside Learning Center was alive every hour, children's laughter spilling from the classrooms, teachers moving between projects, the hum of purpose filling every hallway. What had begun as an act of kindness had grown into a living thing, one that no lawsuit or headline could destroy. Daniel Sterling stood by the pool early one morning, the same hour he had once arrived at Lakeview a year ago when he was still a man armored by wealth and distance. The air was quiet, the water perfectly still, reflecting the morning sky. In that mirror of blue, he could almost see the ghost of the man he'd been driven, controlled, and afraid of vulnerability. He let the memory drift away. Ethan's laughter carried from the courtyard. The boy was stronger now, his voice clearer, his confidence growing each day. Anna was with him, of course, her small hands animated as she tried to teach him how to skip stones. Linda watched from a bench nearby, her gentle smile the same calm anchor it had always been. "Like this," Anna said, flicking a flat stone across the water. It jumped once, twice, 3 times before sinking. Ethan clapped. "You did it." "You try," she said. He threw his stone too high. It splashed straight down, but he laughed anyway. Mine made a big splash. Daniel walked over, smiling. "That's the best kind of try," he said, kneeling beside them. Anna handed him another stone. "Your turn, Mr. Sterling." He took it, weighed it in his hand, and tossed it across the pool. It skipped 5 times before sinking. Ethan's eyes widened. "You win," Daniel smiled softly. "We all win." The 3 of them stayed there for a while, throwing stones and letting the ripples spread. Later that afternoon, a small ceremony was held in the main hall. Parents, volunteers, and children gathered to celebrate the center's 1-year anniversary. Photos lined the walls: Anna's mural, the gala, the new scholarship students, the first therapy graduates. The headline that had once defined scandal now hung framed beside them. "A waitress's daughter who taught a billionaire humanity." Daniel took the stage for the final speech of the day. He didn't have papers this time, just his heart. "1 year ago," he began, "we stood in this place as strangers. Today, we stand as a community. What started as one act of courage became hundreds, then thousands. The ripples keep moving." He paused, his eyes finding Anna and Ethan sitting together in the front row. "Some say change happens in boardrooms or parliaments, but I've learned it begins with the smallest voices, the ones the world ignores, until they shout through their actions." The crowd fell silent, listening. "I lost a company," Daniel said, "but I gained something much greater: faith. Faith in decency, faith in the next generation, faith in a little girl who refused to let cruelty have the last word." Applause filled the hall, quiet at first, then thunderous. Daniel felt his throat tighten. When he looked down, Anna was crying softly, and Ethan, trying to comfort her, handed her a small folded paper boat. "Don't cry," Ethan whispered. "It floats." After the ceremony, Linda found Daniel outside, sitting on the stone steps beneath the fading evening light. "They'll talk about you for years, you know," she said. He smiled. "They'll talk about her, not me." "That's how it should be." Linda shook her head. "You gave people a map. She gave them a reason to follow it." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe that's what real change looks like, a map drawn by a child." She sat beside him. "What will you do now?" He looked toward the hills glowing gold under the sunset. "Keep building. There are other towns like this. Other places waiting for their own Annas. We'll open more centers, teach kids empathy, give them space to belong." Linda nodded, her eyes glistening. "You really think kindness can change the world?" He turned to her, his voice steady. "It already did." The next week, Daniel and Ethan visited the local park near their home, a quiet spot overlooking the river. They brought along Anna and Linda for a picnic. The air smelled of wildflowers, and the sound of cicadas hummed like music. Ethan sat cross-legged, building a tiny dam with pebbles, while Anna collected twigs to make little boats. "This one's called Courage," she said proudly. "And this one's Kindness." Daniel watched them, smiling. "Good names." Anna nodded, placing the 2 boats on the water. They go together. The current caught the twigs, and the boats drifted down the stream, side by side. Ethan watched them float away, whispering, "Still floats." Daniel felt something shift deep inside him, a sense of peace that wasn't loud or triumphant but quietly whole. For the first time since his wife's passing, he wasn't haunted by what he'd lost but grateful for what had been returned, the ability to hope. That evening, back at home, Daniel sat by his desk writing a letter, one he didn't intend to send, but needed to write. To whoever finds this story years from now, if you wonder how one small act can change the world, remember the sound of a splash in the water and a child's hand reaching in. That's where all good things begin, not with power, but with compassion. And if you ever doubt the strength of kindness, look for the ripples. They never stop. He folded the paper neatly and placed it inside a drawer with a single word written across the top: legacy. As the night deepened, Daniel checked on Ethan one last time. The boy was asleep, clutching the red and blue paper boat Anna had made for him. The window was open, letting in the quiet hum of the world outside, the wind through trees, the faint laughter of children in the distance. Daniel whispered into the dark, "Good night, son." "Good night, Anna." "Thank you." Oh. The moonlight spilled across the desk, glinting off the medal Anna had once received, and the framed photo of the three of them beside the pool. It was simple, almost ordinary, yet it contained everything that mattered. In that soft silver light, the world looked whole again. The past had forgiven itself. The future was waiting wide, open, and good, and somewhere far away, beyond the reach of memory or fame, two tiny boats drifted together down a quiet river, side by side, carrying everything that courage had built, still floating, always floating. The story reminds us that real strength doesn't come from wealth, power, or status. It comes from compassion. One small act of courage, like a child choosing to help when others turn away, can ripple outward and change countless lives. We learn that kindness is never wasted, even when it costs us something. True justice isn't always delivered in courtrooms. Sometimes it begins at the edge of a pool, in the simple decision to care. In the end, the story teaches that decency is contagious. When one person dares to do what's right, others remember how, and the world becomes just a little gentler, one ripple at a time.